Epilogue. Toyono was alive as it had never been before. The village, previously more of a hamlet than anything else, had increased in size beyond measure. Over 250 vehicles had streamed in during the past 3 weeks. The population had exploded, bringing many things. The practitioners of the hype machine had descended like a plague of locusts, settling on the town to ensure that even the locals would cause no problem to the events of the next night. The mere handful of villagers were bought off with a pittance, although a king's ransom to them. Fast food stalls moved in, a sea of cabins had sprang up overnight, and in the centre of it all, just outside the original hamlet, was the circular Street Fighter ring. Beyond this were 12 large huts. These were where the contestants stayed, each one a celebrity, and cheered as they walked through the humble dwellings. They were given the best of everything, and all for free. The toughest 12 people on earth. In the first hut, Edmund Honda knelt before a small altar, eyes closed in silent prayer. He petitioned his dead master to smile upon him in tomorrow's contest, and promised to uphold his honour. Folded on the double bed behind him was his traditional sumo garb, blue and white, checked. Chun-Li sat in silence and stared at the floor. So many things had unfolded in the past year, so many new experiences in her travels and subsequent training with the champion. Ken's appearance had ruined her wishes to be alone with Ryu for the night before the tournament. She was worried for the Japanese warrior. He had emerged from his meditation, a shadow of the boy she had seen last year, and she doubted the reality of his air of detached superiority. In the months they had spent together, she had grown close to Ryu, sharing her thoughts with the quiet, almost fragile-looking man. He was not fully recovered from the revelations his master had told him before that shocking, untimely death. He was scarred for life by those events, as she had learned. Her mind turned over what conclusions he may be coming to about Shenlong. She understood the mystery now, for after the months of using it as a tool to get him to talk, in the last week she had found new power being channeled through her body. Secretly she had crept from the house in the dead of night, this new energy crackling in her mind, and let instinct take over. Fists tracing unknown symbols in the air. She had screamed in silent effort as the power flew from her heart down her locked arms, and a blue ball of flame leapt from between her outstretched wrists. Shenlong had chosen her too. Ryu didn't know of this. He had mysteriously denied her request to be taught the ancient art. For what reasons he would not say, but Shenlong had chosen her. Ken paced up and down his cabin, wondering if he should be out there enjoying himself. Last year he had jumped at the chance of all that praise and adulation, but now he felt no need for it. The boyish boasting and tall tales were all very well, but he had matured just as Ryu, and they both knew it. The unspoken bond between them these past few days had been tense and uneasy, and Ken wondered just what was going on in Ryu's mind. That girl had something to do with it, but hey, he should be worrying for himself, not the reigning champ. He cracked open a beer and sat on the bed, thinking of his farm back home and missing his wife like crazy. In one of the new bars that had appeared in Toyono, Balrog faced Zangief over a single vodka. He had been waiting for a whole year to get rid of the big dumb fool, but he found it strangely comforting to drink with him before the big day. They had decided, much to Zangief's grumblings, to limit themselves to one drink only, the memory of how he ended up in Russia still horribly fresh in Balrog's mind. Zangief was happy. He had trained hard and was as good as he could be. The American boxer had been a help, and he hoped to remain friends after the contest, however it turned out. Flexing his knotted arms, the Russian world warrior turned his thoughts back to his tactics for the next day. Across the street, loud music and drunken singing drifted upwards from another makeshift alehouse. Set up 1 week earlier, the place had quickly earned a reputation as Toyono's hottest night spot. The proprietor and head barman looked on as the patrons formed as large a circle as possible, without crushing themselves against the walls. In the centre stood a tall figure in garish silver, blue and green costume, a small 6-string guitar held across his stomach, decorative metal claws extending from his hands. With a high-pitched scream and a stamp of Andalusian heels, he jumped in the air and started strumming, leaping and pirouetting in a wild Spanish dance, and the crowd began to clap along. The most agile person anyone in the bar had ever seen. He darted around the circle in his element, ponytail trailing and building up to a frenzied crescendo, ending with a final, triumphant scream. Vigor! Guile brooded in his hut, a cynical mood having taken him these past few hours. God, he wanted a drink. Wanted, but didn't need. The realization gladdened him somewhat. He still couldn't quite believe it. The faint music of drunken revelry filtered through the walls, and probably wouldn't die down until the very early hours. Guile knew that if he could resist that calling, there was nothing he could not accomplish. A gang of small children had gathered around the man who sat on the edge of town, arms and legs folded, eyes shut, still as a corpse. They dared each other to touch him and prove he was alive, laughing and joking at this real weirdo. The biggest child, a 12-year-old, grew tired of the other's lack of courage. He strode up to the sitting man, swinging his arms with mock bravado, and reached out to touch the chocolate skin. Before his hand got within a foot, Dalsim's eyes snapped open, and the child's face contorted into a look of horror. His friends ran for their lives, scared witless by the menace that emanated from those now sinister blue orbs. Dalsim did not fear the opposition. Sagat scraped the cutthroat razor over the last patch of stubble at the back of his head, and threw it onto the floor. Toweling himself dry, he looked feverishly for something else to occupy his mind. Scrabbling in his hold-all, he produced a pack of cards and began to throw them onto the table in perfect order, setting up a solo game. This manic attempt to keep his thoughts focused on trivia was for good reason. If he let his mind go free, knowing that his two most hated enemies were within 50 feet of him, he would have to kill both now or go insane with frustration. The time for vengeance would come tomorrow. They would both burn slowly. The doctor frowned and shrugged his shoulders. Bison had asked him the same question time after time, and he couldn't answer. Calculating the dosage of the unknown drug needed to bring an addict back to normal without risk of an OD was near impossible. Even his meagre ethics forbade it. The cravings were not too strong at any rate. The last fix was only 2 days ago, and a big one at that. The master, M. Bison, would just have to chance not getting one of his occasional twinges of drug lust in the contest. He crossed his fingers. It should all be fine. Alone, Ryu fixed his gaze upon the white porcelain jug that stood on the counter. A pale blue swallow glided across its neck in an imitation willow pattern style. He found himself yearning to go to Chun-Li's hut, and this time couldn't push the thought away. This only confirmed what he had suspected, and Ken must have sensed, to make so many jokes about it. A sigh escaped his mouth, the mournful sound surprisingly morose to his ears. This had been the downfall of the White Dragon, when he fell in love, and Ryu had shut out all others before now. Would Shenlong permit these feelings and let Ryu serve still? He didn't know, and wasn't sure if he wanted to. Yet the decision he'd made as he returned from the mountains still held. He would serve Shenlong to the best of his abilities, whatever the outcome. If permitted tomorrow, he would defend his championship with honour. The 12th hut was empty, unused. The demon of the forest seemed to prefer the solitude of the wilderness to his human side. The festivities drew to a close, lights blinking out one after the other, the last bar closing, and the last intoxicated spectator staggering home to bed. The silence that descended upon the now dark Toyono was one of anticipation. When the sun rose in just a few hours, the street fighters would do battle, and the world would feel the blast. Wow, what a journey. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed the book. I sure did. Alright, I'll be honest. This series, it didn't turn out as well as I'd hoped. Maybe the world just wasn't ready for an audiobook of a novel based on a game that's now 3 decades old. Maybe it was because I put the 2 in the title as Roman numerals, instead of just as a 2. Or maybe it's because it took me a whole year to finish editing something that should have been done in a couple of weeks. We'll never know for sure. When I started with this book, it was this strange artifact that I thought we could all have a bit of fun with in a time of uncertainty. And maybe it was at first, but to be honest, it's not like it's any less worthwhile than these guys. And what I remembered along the way was that when I was a little kid, I was a huge Street Fighter fan. I even made my own poster for Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Back then, me and my cousin used to play the games obsessively, trying to unlock all the endings, and it was really something special when you got one you'd never seen before. I guess that kind of excitement doesn't really exist now. But to that kid, discovering this book, on that charity shop shelf of random junk, was the coolest thing imaginable. And I think it's a real shame that you'll struggle to find a copy online today. So here it is, for everyone to enjoy. If you enjoyed this experience at all, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, because more good stuff awaits. It's gonna take a few minutes, but it's worth it.